On February 27, 2026, in Los Angeles, the news broke quietly at first. Neil Sedaka had passed away at the age of 86. The family released a brief statement, simple, dignified, almost understated. But within hours, something remarkable happened. Radio stations began spinning his records again. Streaming platforms pushed his catalog to the front page. Breaking up is hard to do. Laughter in the rain. Oh, Carol. It was as if the world had instinctively reached for the comfort of his melodies. Obituaries highlighted chart positions, awards, and career milestones. Yet numbers alone never explained Neil Sedaka's endurance. What truly made him timeless was structure. Songs built with such precision and emotional clarity that a few opening chords could unlock memories decades old. Before we continue, take 1 second to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss more real stories like this. Neil Sedaka wasn't an accident of pop history, he was trained for it. Born in Brooklyn, New York in 1939, he grew up in a working-class family that valued discipline and ambition. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was a serious pursuit. He studied at the prestigious Juilliard School of Music as a child, absorbing classical foundations that would later define his pop craftsmanship. That early training gave him something many teen idols didn't have: technical armor. He understood harmony, he respected arrangement, he could build a melody the way an architect designs a cathedral, balanced, intentional, unforgettable. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, he became one of the defining voices of the Brill Building era. Inside those New York offices, where songwriters crafted hits for a booming youth market, Sedaka partnered with lyricist Howard Greenfield. Together, they created songs that felt youthful yet structured, playful yet precise. Calendar Girl, Happy Birthday Sweet 16, Breaking Up is Hard to Do. The hooks were immediate, the phrasing was clean, his voice carried a distinctive brightness, earnest but controlled. By 1962, Sedaka was a global star. He toured relentlessly. Teen magazines featured him on glossy covers. Fans screamed his name. Yet, even at the height of fame, there were signs that he was different from many of his contemporaries. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't scandal-driven. He was disciplined, almost studious. Behind the stage lights, he was a husband and father, protective of stability in a business that rarely offered it. Then the mid-1960s arrived, and with them a cultural earthquake. The British invasion reshaped the soundscape. Bands wrote their own material, leaned into edgier tones, and shifted pop toward rock. Suddenly, the polished Brill Building style felt dated. Sedaka's chart dominance evaporated almost overnight. Radio moved on. Record executives grew cautious. The teen idol era closed its curtain. For many artists, that would have been the end. But this is where the so-called double life began. While American audiences assumed he had faded away, Neil Sedaka quietly rerouted his career. Instead of chasing trends desperately, he leaned into his strength: songwriting. He began writing for other performers. Some tracks became hits without his name attached in bold letters. In certain markets, his voice was present but not foregrounded. In others, his melodies traveled under entirely different banners. He recorded in multiple languages. He built audiences in Europe and Australia. While American radio had turned its attention elsewhere, overseas listeners welcomed him. In the United Kingdom, he found renewed appreciation. Concert halls filled again. He wasn't a nostalgic act there. He was current. This wasn't exile, it was reinvention. The discipline learned at Juilliard became his survival tool. He refined arrangements, he experimented subtly, he adapted production styles without sacrificing melodic clarity. Importantly, he maintained something rare in show business: stability at home. Through career turbulence, he protected his family life. There were no public meltdowns, no chaotic headlines. Instead, there was quiet persistence. For more than 30 years, this parallel path continued. In America, he was remembered as a former teen idol. Abroad, he was evolving, recording, selling tickets. Two narratives ran simultaneously, one visible, one largely unseen. The comeback that American audiences witnessed in the mid-1970s didn't materialize from nowhere. It was the result of steady rebuilding. When Laughter in the Rain climbed the charts in 1975, it felt like a return. In truth, it was a reveal. He hadn't been absent, he had been preparing. His duet, Bad Blood, featuring Elton John, reintroduced him to a new generation. Younger listeners heard sophistication beneath the pop sheen. Industry peers recognized his craftsmanship. The comeback wasn't fueled by nostalgia, it was powered by skill that had never disappeared. The idea of a double life suggests secrecy. In Sedaka's case, it was more about parallel existence. Public perception told one story, a star who peaked early. Reality told another, a composer who adjusted geography, language, and strategy to stay active in a shifting industry. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. Neil Sedaka understood tempo, not just in music, but in life. When the world accelerated, he recalibrated. When tastes shifted, he studied them. When doors closed domestically, he opened them internationally. He never abandoned melody as his anchor. By the time streaming platforms revived his catalog in 2026, younger audiences were discovering something their grandparents already knew. These songs endure because they are built to endure. Clean chord progressions, memorable hooks, emotional directness without cynicism. The first chapter of his life was bright, immediate, explosive. The second was strategic, global, and quietly resilient. Together, they form the real story, one not defined by a rise and fall, but by adaptation. In the next part, we trace that hidden journey more closely, inside the overseas rebuilding, the industry alliances that made his comeback possible, and the disciplined mindset that kept him steady while others burned out. Because Neil Sedaka didn't just survive changing eras, he mastered them.
When American radio cooled on Neil Sedaka in the late 1960s, the narrative hardened quickly. Former teen idol, yesterday's sound, a chapter closed. But while headlines moved on, Sedaka began the most strategic phase of his career. He focused on markets that still valued melody-first songwriting. The United Kingdom proved pivotal. British audiences, always attentive to strong composition, embraced his live performances. He wasn't treated as nostalgia, he was treated as a craftsman. That distinction mattered. Sedaka adjusted production styles subtly, less bubblegum, more contemporary instrumentation, yet he refused to chase trends blindly. Instead, he filtered them through his compositional discipline. The classical training from childhood still shaped his instincts. Even his pop arrangements carried structural balance. Crucially, he also leaned deeper into collaboration. Industry friendships opened doors. Support from artists who respected his catalog helped reposition him. When the mid-1970s revival arrived, it wasn't framed as a gimmick, it felt earned. Laughter in the Rain became a defining comeback single, lush, romantic, unmistakably melodic. Bad Blood added contemporary edge. The charts reflected something rare, not a novelty resurgence, but a genuine second act. Behind the scenes, Sedaka remained intensely work-focused. He rehearsed meticulously. He guarded his voice. He prioritized consistency over spectacle. While some peers succumbed to excess, he treated music like long-term architecture. Build carefully, reinforce foundations, let structure outlast fashion. His catalog also proved adaptable across generations. The 1962 version of Breaking Up Is Hard to Do was bright and upbeat. The 1975 version slowed the tempo, revealing emotional depth that had always been there. Few artists successfully reinterpret their own hits. Sedaka did, demonstrating how strong songwriting can survive stylistic transformation. That adaptability defined his so-called double life. For 3 decades, 2 audiences perceived him differently. One remembered the early hits, the other experienced ongoing evolution. Neither view was false, but neither was complete. When digital platforms in the 21st century revived legacy catalogs, Sedaka's songs found new listeners again. Playlists bridged decades. Algorithms introduced teenagers to melodies written before their parents were born. The durability of his work became measurable in streams rather than vinyl sales. By the time of his passing in 2026, the industry landscape had transformed beyond recognition from his debut years, yet the core requirement for longevity had not changed: songs that connect instantly and endure structurally. Neil Sedaka's life was not a scandal-driven saga. It was something rarer, a case study in quiet resilience. He experienced industry rejection without implosion. He faced shifting tastes without bitterness. He rebuilt without demanding headlines. The phrase double life makes for compelling storytelling, but perhaps a better phrase is dual rhythm: public spotlight and private rebuilding, early fame and mature craftsmanship, domestic dip and international growth. These rhythms overlapped, creating a career arc far more complex than a simple rise and fall narrative. In the end, his legacy isn't just the familiar hooks, it's the example he set. Adapt without panic, protect your foundation, let craft carry you when hype disappears. When those opening piano chords play, whether in a 1962 jukebox or a 2026 streaming queue, they still do what great songs are meant to do. They trigger recognition. They carry memory. They remind us that melody, when built well, doesn't expire. Neil Sedaka didn't vanish when trends shifted. He adjusted his tempo and kept writing, and that steady rhythm, maintained for more than half a century, is what truly explains his staying power.